All right, so we have you, and me.
All right, I think it's time we get started. All right, I've restarted the recording and I'm going to mute everyone to start off. Just a second. All right, the time is now 7:31. I will call this Yardley Borough Council meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Mary Ann, if you could do our roll call, I'll unmute you.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson?
Present.
Ms. Siegel-Morris?
Here.
Mr. Ross?
Here.
Mr. Bria?
Here?
Mr. McCann?
Here.
Mr. Barry?
Present.
And Mr. Feiner?
Present.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council members are all in attendance. I believe I see Mayor Harding on the call as well. All right, moving forward to community announcements. Unsurprisingly, we do not have much going on still with everything being closed. I did, however, just want to make quick note of the fact, we did discuss it last time during our council meeting, that the farmers market is continuing to operate, albeit with some different rules and restrictions. But we're glad to allow them to keep operating. It's a good thing for the borough. So I just want to remind everyone that's still going on. And if anyone from council or the mayor has an event or something they'd like to share at this time, please do so. All right, hearing none, we will move on to the public comment portion of the meeting. This is the part of the meeting where members of the public may address council on items which do not appear on the agenda. If you wish to make comment on an item that does appear on an agenda, you will be given an opportunity to do so at that time. Before making comment, residents are asked to give their full name and address for the record. And just as a housekeeping item, I am going to ask that everyone please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom if you wish to be acknowledged. If you are on your phone, you do so by touching *9. If you have joined through the app, or actually on the desktop, you can find that by hitting the participants button at the bottom of your screen along the toolbar, and there you should see the raise hand icon. My apologies, I'm not sure exactly what it looks like if you're on your phone or on a tablet, but there should be a similar feature there. So I do see that we have one hand raised already. I will unmute you, Dr. Perlmutter. Dawn, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can.
Hello? Okay, sorry, I did it differently this time. I just have a quick comment. It's in regard to the Chapter 5 of the Yardley Borough Ordinances. It's on code enforcement. I just was wondering, Chapter 5, 104, it reads that a Board of Appeals shall be established by resolution of the Borough Council of Yardley Borough in conformity with the requirements of the relevant provisions of this part. I was just wondering, do we have a Board of Appeals?
Paula, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I do not believe we have that actively set up. However, we were having discussions about creating that this week, actually. So that is on our radar. We know it's something that needs to be done. Our hope was to be able to do this in partnership with Lower Makefield to save us all some time and money and pool our resources. Paula, do you have anything to add in regards to this? Or Bucky, possibly as well. This is sort of a legal thing. But if not, the short answer at the time is that we do not have that set up.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any further public comment tonight? All right, I don't see any, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is consideration of the consent agenda. I do just want to note that normally our certificate of appropriateness would be under this portion. However, we're going to consider that at the end of the meeting under other business, since there is an appeal from the applicant. So of the two items in the consent agenda, would any member of council like to pull one for separate consideration? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve today's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Councilperson Thompson, seconded by Councilperson Berry to approve the consent agenda dated today, May 19th, 2020. Any questions, comments from council? Questions, comments from the public? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. Continue next item. Chief Kelly, please report.
Unmute. Only one item on the report this evening, sir. We've seen an uptick in speeding complaints over the last couple of weeks, largely due to the increase in motorists back on the road. We're not at pre-virus populations on the motorists yet, but we have seen an uptick in both accidents and speeding. We are addressing those with enforcement. That's the end of my report, sir.
All right, thank you, Chief. Do any members of council or the mayor have questions for Chief Kelly? All right, hearing none, we will continue to our engineer's report. Ms. Coletti.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Alrighty. Tom had trouble getting on, so he is on speaker on my cell phone. So he's listening and will pipe in if he needs to.
Yeah, I'm here, so.
Hear him? Okay. All right. We have a lot to cover today. So we will start a couple of updates, and then we'll get into the project-specific updates. So one update that requires a decision to be made is in regards to the EAC grant for the wastewater shed management plan. We received the first invoice from ASA in April, and we have not yet made a decision yet if we're going to pay them first and then seek reimbursement through the grant, or submit invoices directly to the grant coordinator. That is an option. I don't know how forward it is. And that's kind of something that you all will have to decide. This first invoice is just shy of $4,000. So I don't know where things stand right now financially, if that's something that we want to try and punt to something else. But that's something that needs to be decided. And in addition, to move forward with that particular project, we're ready to purchase equipment, and that does have to come specifically from you. And that total should not be $1,500 after taxes and shipping and handling and all that stuff is accounted for. And ideally, we would like to purchase, in the next week or two, so that they can get out and install the equipment so that they start monitoring.
All right, so sorry, Paula, I'm going to mute you. There's a little background noise there. So Liz, do you need a decision from us tonight on the invoices?
I need a decision mostly on the equipment so we can move forward with that. I think that it's okay if the decision on how to pay the first invoice lags to next month. Because I haven't heard back yet from the grant coordinator about how it works if we want to go directly to them. So I don't have the direct information.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I think my preference would be that the grantor pay the engineering firm directly, but obviously we can ask them what their preference is, and if we don't have that information yet, then I think we should wait until we know how they normally handle it.
Okay, that's fair. But the equipment we do have to buy, that was a stipulation in the the grant because it couldn't be owned by RVE and it can't be owned by ASA. It's supposed to be equipment bought for the borough for the sake of the project. But it is certainly going to be reimbursable. It's part of the project budget. You guys just have to buy it first.
I'll make a motion to approve an expenditure for equipment for the Growing Greener grant for, what is it, testing supplies?
Yes.
Approximately $1,500.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Councilperson Thompson, seconded by Councilperson Ross, to purchase equipment for the Growing Greener grant in an amount not to exceed $1,500. Do we have questions, comments from council or the mayor? Any questions or comments from the public? All right, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. All right, up to you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is in regards to the Main Street Sidewalk Phase 2 project. So the last place we stood was that in November, we were awarded $125,000 to go towards that, which wasn't quite enough to cover all of it. And that is why we applied for the PA Small Sewer and Water Grant to cover the drainage aspects of the project. However, I just got an email from them yesterday that said that they are no longer awarding that at the July meeting. It has been pushed until September. Why that matters is that the existing HOP that we have from when we did the work earlier but didn't actually go out to the full extent expires in 2021. So if we don't find out about the PA Small Sewer and Water Grant until sometime in September and then try to keep moving forward with getting that done, we might find ourselves in a slight situation. So because that grant, about 10% of it is allowed to be used for engineering design, I think it might be prudent to at least move forward with the design aspect of that project and have that ready to go. Also, that same grant is open again for reapplyment and it is due at the end of July. And again, this year, they are not asking for a match. I think it's worth reapplying, but that's something that you all will have to decide. And with that not being due till the end of July, you have time to decide if you want to do that.
Okay, great. When would you need a decision for that one by, just so we can get it on our calendar?
It's due at the very end, so July 31st. So if we could have a decision made by the second June meeting, that would give us ample time to get that ready. Those grants are a little bit more involved than the ones that we've been doing for the Pico lot because we do have to have draft drawings and such.
Okay. All right, we will get that in the calendar. Probably bring in Matt in Public Works to fill in some of the details on that.
Okay, and then with regards to where we stand on.
Can I ask one question about that?
Sure.
Is there any way that you know of to get an extension on the HOP considering the situation that's currently?
Well, since it was tied to a grant that is technically closed out, I'm not sure, but we could certainly look into it. I can certainly reach out to PennDOT. We already have to adjust it because it doesn't, there were updates that were needed to the design. So we would already need to do some reworking of it. So maybe that is an opportunity to completely renew the HOP.
Okay, thank you.
I can chime in for 1 second. If I remember correctly, last year when we applied for the extension, that was the last year that we were able to extend the HOP. So we might have to do some sort of work on the sidewalk this year to be able to move forward with it. But I could be wrong and stuff could have changed because of the situation going on now.
Okay, yeah, I'll certainly circle back with the team about who put together that initial HOP and get more details about it. I just know that it does expire, the grant itself expires at the end of May of 2021. And to make sure we recoup the 30,000 that's still tied up in that, we have to close out the HOP to get it. So that's kind of, that's the final piece left to close the project. So it's a weird tie-in.
Can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any grant applications that we have already submitted that we're still waiting on in regards to the sidewalk, or have we been denied up to this point?
No, it's that PA small sewer and water one that I just found out they're not awarding it until September, where they had told us it would be July.
Where that would take the sidewalk all the way up to the easement to the bridge.
I believe that's what we applied for, but I would have to double check the extent of which we did it for the drainage.
Okay, thanks.
Liz, since we also already filled out the application previously, is there that much work to reapply in terms of?
There really shouldn't be. We probably would be fine even waiting till the first meeting in July, but the thing is you have to have a resolution. So we would have to pass the resolution at the second July meeting. So it just would be a little bit more prudent to make that decision by the second June meeting, but it could probably be pushed.
And any further questions on that one?
All right. Sorry, I accidentally muted myself for a second there.
Actually, David, I do have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
How far does the HOP take us? Does it take us all the way to where we're asking the grant to be?
HOP currently only goes to Cold Springs.
Okay, so we would need more permitting if we got.
We would need more permitting regardless. But the reality is that with the existing $125,000 grant, the sidewalk fund, and that active HOP up through Cold Springs, we could potentially do some of the sidewalk like right now if we wanted to. We just we don't have the funds to go all the way out to the easement, and that is the ultimate goal.
Right. All right.
Sorry to.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing to this conversation, but just, you bring up an interesting point only because I remember that with the first, sidewalk phase, the surprisingly high cost of the traffic management. And I just wonder to what extent it's on the table to even do a little segment, because we are benefiting from this low traffic situation right now.
Yeah, and the only thing that's stopping us from now is that we don't have a final design yet to bid out. That's really where we're at, and we were kind of put on pause with the project overall because we were waiting to hear about the PA small sewer and water. We were initially supposed to hear back from that at the end of February. Then they came back and like, oh, we're not awarding it until July, and so still on pause, and now it's moved to September, and that's why I'm kind of pushing. I think we should at least do what we have the HOP to, if we can.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That all makes sense now.
Great. All right. Like I said, we'll handle a lot of this offline. But if your cat will let you, if there's anything more.
She's being a character right now. I have the wing for like the first time, and she's very curious. It's right behind the laptop here. Okay. All right. Next update. The next update we have the ML7 project. We just received as-built, and the inspector was able to verify that the punch list has been addressed. So we will be moving forward with closeout with that project. So that's good news. And then everything else is kind of project specific, and we will get into it. So I think we can move forward into the payment certificates for the Green Light Go. Do I do that, or is that something that Matt still does with Public Works?
You can, if there's any explanation involved, you can give it, and then I'm basically just ask us for a motion and someone will make it.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, because of trying to get to the value that we needed to, I don't think any of you have seen them ahead of time. So I will just kind of go through them real quick here. Let me see if I can pull them back up. Oh, I could share my screen if that's helpful for you to see them. Would
That
anyone
would
want?
be helpful.
Yeah, I will pull them up and then share my screen. So let's look at payment cert 1.
Is there anything confidential on it?
I don't believe so. Okay.
No, do you have the icon there? I might have to make you a co-host for you to share.
It says that I can. Oh, no, host disabled participant screen share.
All right, hold on just a second. We can fix that.
Cool.
You should be able to now.
Okay. Here we go. Share. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Whoop. Somebody needs to be admitted to the waiting room. You saw that?
Yep, I got them.
Okay, so the first payment certificate would be for the amount of $33,285.70. And then, do you guys want to see any of the backup information, or is this letter enough?
The letter's enough for me.
Okay.
I guess we'll take them one at a time. So then, Matt, do you want to make a motion to approve this one?
Yeah, I can make the motion to approve payment certificate in the amount of $33,285.70 to Armor and Sons Electric.
Second.
All right, motion is made by Councilmember Ross, seconded by Councilmember Barry for payment certificate number 1 in the amount of $33,285.70. Are there any questions or comments from council or the mayor? All right, before I call a question 2, I'll just note, I know we've talked about this before, but because we're at the end of this grant, these payments are being done so that we basically still qualify for reimbursement. This is following PennDOT's recommendation for how this was to be handled. So saying that, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, the motion carries 7-0.
Okay, and then let me pull up the second one. 2. Okay, and then this is the second one. And so this covers all the work through the end of last week. And once we got the easement in and construction started again, they moved quite rapidly. So we're doing well. And to meet the 80% requirement that was required of us by PennDOT, we only have to add in about $10,000 from the engineering fees, and then we're all good. So I'll be working with Paula to fill out all those forms and get them submitted. We're hoping to submit them either by the end of this week or early next week so that we can all relax because they're due at the end of the month. So the second payment, sir, is for $168,938.48.
All right, do we hear a motion on this payment certificate?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve payment certificate number 2 in the amount of $168,938.48 to Armor and Sons Electric.
Second.
All right, that motion was made by Councilmember Ross, seconded by Councilmember Barry. Payment certificate number 2 in the amount of $168,938.48 to Armor and Sons Electric. Are there any comments or questions from council or the mayor? Comments or questions from the public? All right, hearing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Now I think we are on to the individual project updates. So, which one are we starting with? We are starting with Maine and Afton. Well, we kind of just did that with the payment certs. So like I said, the next step is to fill out the Green Light Go reimbursement paperwork. We had to reach a total of $212,000 to reach PennDOT's portion of the grant. So those two payment certs result in 202. So like I said, we will be requesting reimbursement about 10K of RVE's design fees, which were already paid for at the end of 2019. So it's not an additional expense. We are just choosing to request reimbursement on them instead of having Armour put in another cert for work that hasn't actually been completed yet. So that is how we've decided to meet the requirement. Mary Yardley Bridge. We finally heard back from PHMC today, which is very exciting. I could share that too. Getting all into the sharing.
That just came this afternoon, right?
It did. Yep. Just had it this afternoon. So let me pull up Emma's email with their letter response. So let's see. Okay, share. Where is the letter from? Oh, there it is. Okay. You all see that?
Yep.
Good. Okay, so this is a letter that we got today. And basically they said that there were, we're not anticipated to be impacting any type of archaeological resources, which is great. As you all know, we submitted with the intent of doing either the FRP bridge or the aluminum. I gave them all the backup information for both options and stressed that our, main concern was the weight component and ensuring that there was a longevity to the project and that the borough would not need to replace the bridge anytime soon. So the response back was that they have a preference for the aluminum option and the powder coat. I already responded explaining that we definitely do prefer to do the polyurethane coating just because, we know that the powder coating will eventually degrade. And once it does, that's it. There's no way to repair that out in the field. That's not the way that application works. Whereas polyurethane will also eventually degrade and has a longer lifetime than the powder coating. But that does have methods of reapplying safely out in the field. That way the entire bridge wouldn't need to be removed. So, so I responded back to Emma, letting her know that that is our preference, that we will absolutely still go with a brown color, that we can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. And what would be the additional information they would need to go with that round. So that's where we're at with that. Does anyone have any questions about that?
So I guess my question is, can you just sum up? So they approved one of the two options we submitted, or they have a preference?
They have a preference. It seems like they don't actually have the authority to disapprove if you read through their language. But from our standpoint, other than the polyurethane, there really isn't too big of a difference structurally between the aluminum option and the FRP option.
So they're okay with the FRP option?
They didn't comment on it.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's really what I was looking for was, it says preference, it doesn't. So the question is, do they not, who is the one that has to make the final decision on the material? Is it us as council? Is it these guys? Is it somebody else? That's really what I feel like council needs the determination of. Who makes the ultimate decision of what the material is, so we can move forward.
So from my understanding, DCNR is really that will approve the work that we do, but they work very closely with PHMC and they prefer to align with their decisions and their preferences.
But again, and I understand we don't know at this point, that's a preference. Is there one of these materials, is there any reason they can say no to either of these materials? So who makes the final decision? I know DCNR, you're saying, has the final decision. Is it a question of they prefer this, but they'll approve that, or is one of them not approvable?
I'm not getting the indication that one of them's not approvable from this letter, but I don't see the harm in just moving forward with the aluminum option if it's going to cause us less headaches. The only thing that I want to fight on is the powder coating. That just seems silly. We don't want to have to replace this in 15 years when that starts to degrade.
The next steps from here, assuming we were to move forward with the recommendation that's here, I guess we would have to start a bid process, or what does it look like from here?
Well, first we would have to finish design, and then there are other permits that we need to get. There's like a general permit that we would need to get from PADEP, but that's not super involved. But we could start a good amount of that, but we wouldn't be able to submit it until we had finalized drawings and finalized the disturbance and all sorts of stuff. And we put all of that on hold when we didn't know what material we were moving forward with.
All right, understood. All right. This always puts us in a funny situation when things like this show up the day of the council meeting, because it doesn't give us too much time to respond. Actually, I see Susan Taylor waving your hand, so go ahead if you have a comment or question.
The hands up thing disappears when the shared screen goes on.
Oh, should I stop sharing screen then?
No, that's fine. But I couldn't do hands up other than physically hands up.
It worked, so that's the important part.
That's good. So it would seem to me that the most dangerous option as far as the future of this bridge would be if the bridge were graffitied. So can you speak to whether the powder coating or the polyurethane coating would stand up better to graffiti solvent, graffiti remover?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I could certainly look into that. But my guess would be the polyurethane, especially since it has reapplication methods, whereas the powder coating just doesn't.
Okay.
But I can look into that.
Good. Does Gator Bridge do the polyurethane coating?
Yes, they do. Yeah, it's slightly more expensive, not significantly. It is an extra expense. But the aluminum bridge was significantly cheaper than the FRP. So I think it was still cheaper than the FRP option, even with the polyurethane.
Okay. And the polyurethane process is done in the factory?
The initial one, yes.
But they have the Patrick thing.
Okay. In my research, since all this arrived this afternoon, it seems that graffiti removers are urethane based. So that may well be the way to go. I did read PHMC's letter as having them evaluate polyurethane versus powder coat, and they opted toward the powder coat. But again, it would seem probably the best solution to go with the coating that will withstand graffiti removal, because that's where I see the powder coating, as far as the research I did, repairing the scratches that didn't seem to be any big deal. As long as the borough didn't allow it to go years and years and get totally scratched, you weren't in the situation of having to send the whole thing back. You go out and use the proper prep and the proper coating to deal with scratches. So to me, that question of which is going to hold up better in the graffiti situation is really important in going forward.
I can chime in on that, actually. Both powder coating and the polyurethane are susceptible to the same solvents that would be in graffiti. So if they were painted with graffiti, then the only way would be to remove the graffiti and the base layer and repaint it. The one that would withstand graffiti the most would actually be the FRP, because the FRP is a dyed material, and the graffiti removal chemicals would actually hold up and remove the paint off the FRP and still leave the dye intact. So out of the options, the FRP would actually hold up to graffiti far superior than any sort of paint product.
And Elizabeth, it's my understanding that you put FRP out as an option to
I did, yep.
PHMC.
Yeah,
And
the way that I structured that application in the narrative was that the borough would like to move forward with the most economical option that also would last the longest, and that our initial intention was to get approval for both options and then bid them both out and then make the decision. And this is how they responded to that.
So theoretically, if we could come to a consensus of opinion about an aluminum bridge coated with polyurethane, we could all live happily ever after, both fiscally and from an historic preservation standpoint, and move on with this. And I did find in my emails today that we started email corresponding about this project 2 years and 2 months ago. So it's time to come to the happy ending.
Second.
I second that 100%, especially with the increased traffic right now. There's so much more foot traffic on that bridge than there ever has been. We need to move forward both for the benefit of the public and the safety. So I'm with you in that.
Yeah, very much agreed there. So I think, what sounds like the best course of action is maybe to wait for that response regarding the polyurethane coating. But assuming we get that in short order, that, if we need to make any approvals, motions from council, that we could have all of those lined up for our next meeting so that we could get to work on this one and actually do it.
David, from my reading of the correspondence today, PHMC is coming back to the borough saying, give us more reasons why you want polyurethane. So the ball, and from my perspective, is back in the borough's court.
I responded already. I explained, while yes, the powder coating is an option and can be very durable, that with the realization that it would eventually degrade and we would not be able to fix it while out in the field, the polyurethane would give us a longer lifetime, and then ask them what other supplemental information they would like to see in regards to that.
But conversely, powder coating can be repaired in the field. So
no, it cannot.
You didn't differentiate between big repairs versus small repairs.
Powder coating cannot be repaired in the field. The way it's repaired is to be removed and replaced with polyurethane.
So you're right, like small little tiny scratches and things like that, that can be dealt with. But when it gets to the point where it's reached its lifetime, which is about 15 years, and it begins chipping, there's literally nothing that can be done to fix that.
Okay. So it would seem that you want to go back to PHMC with the lifetime, and that you want to go back with PHMC if indeed you find that graffiti can be more easily reviewed from polyurethane.
Yeah, that
Those
would
to
be
me are
helpful.
compelling reasons why.
Hey, Elizabeth, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Did you ask them for an opinion about powder coating? Because it feels like that's not even an option for us. It would either be the FRP or the polyethanol or whatever.
So
it's called.
I think the powder coating came from the fact that the initial estimate we received from Gator, which I included, was for the powder coating, and we hadn't received a formal one for the polyurethane. So I think that that's where maybe the comment came from.
Because it's almost like they responded to the one option nobody asked them to respond to,
No,
right?
no, Elizabeth, you put out the powder coating and you put out polyurethane, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And I can personally testify to the fact that all of the interpretive signs along the Delaware Canal are powder coated aluminum, and some of them have been in place for 25 years. None of them are losing their coating.
And
Actually,
that's fair,
incredible.
but most signs don't experience the same kind of wear and tear as a bridge where you have.
I understand that. but
I'm gonna move us along here. This is a debate we've had already. But that being said, we'll handle the, sort of outside of this meeting, we'll handle that communication
Okay.
to follow up, final answer on that coding. But long story short, I'd like to have the agenda items lined up for next time so that we can move forward and hopefully have a bridge there sometime soon.
Yes.
So unless there's any final items on that, actually, I now see John waving his hand. So John Celentano, I will unmute you and
Yeah,
go
David,
ahead.
quick question. What's to keep us from doing, we've settled on a material, so we know the weight, the difference between polyurethane and powder coating exists, but it's probably not a gating decision. What's to keep us from getting all the engineering plans done, just getting everything done, so by the time we get the powder coat versus polyurethane decision, we've already gotten a manufacturing slot, we've got all our design, we've got the RFP out for the bridge, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, yeah, I want to move this along quickly. I think, sort of the reason we're not doing it today is because this letter showed up a couple hours ago. So I think the council's probably just not in a position where they're ready to vote on exactly what we need to do. But we'll, at our next meeting, I think have everyone with all the background information that's going to be relevant.
But could we at least decide to go forward with the design phase? Because I don't think the design is going to be affected by the finish. But in order to get an RFP done, we need to get the design. I know Susan said on this particular issue, we've been talking about it since 2018. We've been talking actually about replacing the bridge since 2013. And it has only gotten worse in condition. So if we want to make this building cycle, before the winter, we probably should get the design done so we can then, plug into that, whatever bridge with whatever coating, et cetera.
Understood. Certainly, does anyone else on council want to chime in? Obviously, if you'd like to make a motion, you can at this time.
Yeah, to move forward with design, we would just need you all to approve moving forward with the aluminum option, and we could jump right on it.
So
I'm for that.
saying aluminum and not FRP, essentially right now. Okay.
That's what you would need to do for us to move forward with design. Yep.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, so the motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Finer to move forward with the design work on an aluminum bridge. Is there any discussion or questions from council or the mayor?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Ross.
I'd like to see if we can move this to like a separate agenda item for the next meeting so everybody can kind of talk and hash this out about the material. Because in my opinion, the aluminum is the inferior choice between the two for cost and safety and many other reasons, just so we can have a forum that we all go through the pros and cons of both materials, and then everybody can make their own educated guess, and then we can vote on it.
I just have one question, Matt. Do you think that there are things to be said that have not been said yet at a council meeting in terms of that educated guess or educated decision being made?
No, but I don't know if everybody has seen it all at one time, where there's been a whole bunch of talk at one meeting about this certain thing and then another meeting at this certain thing. So we can just kind of have like a punch list of, even I'll create a chart or something, all the pros for this, all the cons for this, so everybody can make the informed choice instead of just going with one. Because as I said, as on being on Public Works and working with material sciences, I just want this bridge to be there and last the longest and cost the borough the least and be the safest choice.
So to do a little Robert's Rules interpreting, are you making a motion to postpone to the June 3rd meeting?
I would like to, just so we can, it's kind of been like kicked down the road each meeting, and there's a little information here, there's a little information there. I'd like everybody to talk about it, everybody to go through. So yes, I would like to make that motion.
I understood. So there's a motion to postpone that's been made. Is there a second for that motion?
I just have a question before I decide to second it.
Okay.
How long does it take to prepare this? How long is the design phase? Like, what are we losing if it's delayed 2 weeks?
Tom, do you have a better time estimate on that?
Done a preliminary design, so we have a pretty good handle, probably in both ways. I would say 2 weeks is not going to kill you.
Did you all hear that?
Yes.
Then I'll second it.
All right. So now we have a motion on the table to postpone this business item until the June 3rd meeting. Let's do a roll call on that one. Mary Ann, can you call us one at a time?
We discussed, David?
Actually, yes, you're right. Discussion is on a motion to postpone. So go ahead, John.
And I just
relevant only to the decision to postpone, not to the bridge.
Yeah. And I mean, I have the utmost respect for Matt and his technical expertise. But I do think this was all flushed out. I do think, it is it's a community project. The borough is not funding it completely. There's a fundraising element. It has been over 2 years. People that are going to go out there and fundraise for this are, much more supportive of one option over the other. I think there's enough here, not to postpone it and move forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. McCann. Any other discussion on the motion to postpone?
Oh, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, just, I would say also, having been involved both as a council member and as a resident, I mean, I think that it is, I agree with having, tremendous respect for Matt and the work he's done on it. So I don't want to overrule that per se. But I think we have a rare moment of consensus here, and I would say this, I would say that we have a bridge there right now, just for some perspective, that it's kind of a miracle that it's still even there and that people can still use it. I would say for Matt, if you could give us anything, if you feel that we're making a seriously wrong decision with aluminum, if you could voice that now, as opposed to, slight differences, it would be helpful to just get that flushed out and figured out right now, and move this one step forward.
Sure. There's a whole lot of preference differences between the two materials, but I won't get into any sort of preference. I'm just going to get into absolute safety. If there was a flooding incident, if something struck that bridge, an aluminum bridge would not take the hit whatsoever. It is a severe safety concern in a flooding situation. An FRP bridge would take a much stronger hit and would be way safer in a striking incident of something of that nature. And to me, hands down, that's where my decision lies.
Can we, can I speak to that real quick? I know not, David, I know you don't want to get into the weeds, but I mean, we have extremely, along that portion of the canal, we very rarely have logs floating down the canal. I've never seen one. I don't know if anyone else has. We do have trees falling along the canal, but the trees along there are very well maintained by the property owner. And I understand the risk. Maybe in 30 years, there might be a problem, but I haven't heard any compelling evidence that there is a huge difference between one or the other.
Great.
But
So
if the engineers say that 2 weeks isn't going to kill us, that's fine. But I do think we all are well enough informed on this topic.
Right. So I'll ask, one more time if anyone has last comments before I call the question, but limited specifically to the decision to postpone and not the underlying bridge issues. All right. So hearing none, Marianne, now it's going to be your turn.
Okay.
Let's do a roll call on that one because I know it's going to be split.
Okay. Ms. Thompson?
Nay.
Ms. Siegel Morris?
Nay.
Mr. Ross?
You're muted.
Oh, Matt, you were muted.
Sorry, aye.
Was that an aye? I'm sorry.
Yes, it was. It was an aye.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bria?
Nay.
Mr. McCann?
Nay.
Mr. Finer?
Respectfully, nay.
And Mr. Barry?
Aye.
Okay, the nays have it.
All right, that motion failed.
5-2.
2 to 5. So we are back to the underlying motion, which is to approve the design phase for the aluminum bridge. So do we have any further discussion on that original motion? Any from the public?
Well, just my question is, if we can't do if the only option is to do the powdered option, the other option will be rejected. Or is everyone okay with the powdered option? That was my only concern. That I felt like the FRP was the better option than the powder option. But am I wrong there in that the powder option is actually not a bad option?
It's polyurethane. The FRP is the other material, bridge material. The polyurethane is the better choice over the two material to paint with.
But if we can't do that, but they say we can do the powder, are we okay with the powder?
I mean, that would minimize the lifespan by, I don't want to say significant, but it would. So like the FRP material, the brownness, the color of it, it gets mixed into the plastic itself. So it's just brown. There isn't a coating. You don't have to worry about that kind of aspect. With the aluminum, you're painting that metal. And so the estimates that we saw for powder coating were about 15 years, whereas polyurethane was 20 to 25. The FRP bridge, just as itself on its own with minimal maintenance over time, would be 25 years. But most of the existing FRP bridges have been in place in like forests and things like that for like, some of them for 30 is what some of the places were saying. So they don't have as much historical information about their lifespans as the other materials. So it's a little bit limited.
Right, and just from a procedural point of view, the motion to postpone failed. So essentially by approving design work on an aluminum bridge at this point, council is essentially saying if we end up in a situation where we have to do powder coating, we're at least okay with eating the design work.
Exactly.
So that motion was just made and voted on. So it's somewhat redundant to continue discussion of it.
No,
I'm a little bit confused about this, the interpretation of the letter that says you have to use powder coating. I don't see where that's coming, who's going to tell us we have to use powder coating?
I didn't take it that way. I took it as a preference, and I responded back telling them that we are more comfortable moving with the polyurethane and are happy to provide them with more information if it puts them at ease, but that we would absolutely still stick with brown that seemed to be their main concern, was that it would still blend in.
Yeah,
as much-
to me, this is a much bigger issue than the FRP versus the aluminum, because what we have now is a bridge that's rotting out that was supposed to last way longer than it lasted. Now, it's actually still not too bad. It lasted, what, 35 years?
Yeah, it was put in
To have a
1980.
bridge that needs to be removed in 15 years because it's the covering has worn off, it seems crazy.
I see Ms. Taylor again.
In PHMC's letter, you were given the opportunity to come back and provide more reasons why polyurethane would be a good choice. Tonight, I think we came up with several. Longevity, which wasn't necessarily emphasized here, graffiti removal, etc. And quite frankly, I believe that PHMC would rather see a polyurethane coated aluminum bridge than an FRP bridge. I mean, by far. So I think I would have faith that they will be reasonable regarding the polyurethane.
Yeah, that's helpful because to me, though, it's between really those two options.
Exactly.
All right.
I wouldn't even consider powder coating based on what has come up in this meeting. It just makes no sense to invest that kind of money on something that's going to wear out in such a short time period.
All right, so just going to repeat the underlying motion we have on the table at this point, which is to approve the design work on an aluminum bridge. We're essentially doing that tonight instead of waiting the 2 weeks. So I'm almost afraid to, but I will ask one more time for any final comments or questions on this. All right, and seeing no hand raises, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed
Nay.
and abstentions? All right, by my count, that motion carries 6-1.
Okay.
All right, I think we're still in project updates.
Unbelievably, but yes. Okay, last one, Pico property. So we got the appraisal back yesterday, and George came back with a value of 55,000, which is significantly less than I think we were anticipating, especially because the dummy budget we submitted with the grant assumed that it would be 100,000. So we have not sent anything updated yet to them because I would much prefer to be able to have some documentation from Pico. So now that we have the appraisal completed, and I am still in the process of reviewing it and found some typos and stuff and want those to be addressed, but I think the next step is to get in touch with Pico, and I wasn't sure exactly how council wanted to go about that. If you wanted me to do that, or if we thought at this point in time it would be prudent to have like an actual meeting with them, maybe some public pressure a bit, I don't know. Because obviously 55,000 is significantly less than what was the first price I offered you, Paul? Was it 230,000? Like something outrageous. So yeah, so it's very much going to be a conversation for sure. But if we could have a letter from them with their support and their asking price, I think that would significantly help us in our plight to secure this funding through the grant that we applied for. I think we could also tell them that we would plan to apply for their very own Pico Green grant that they have in the fall. And like maybe that would help with their own logistics internally, whatever they have put aside for their charity things and whatnot. But yeah, I think a conversation with Pico is what is next before I send along the information to the grant coordinator.
Wouldn't that be something if they give us money to buy a property from them? So agreed. So I guess actually, Paula, you've kind of been back and forth with them before. So do you want to maybe reach out and make that initial contact with
Absolutely.
them? All right.
Yeah, Paula, I can, I'll send you the email correspondence I had with them right before we submitted the grant, where I let them know that we were formally applying for it and asked them to provide any kind of documentation if they could. And they basically kind of punted and they were like, let us know how the appraisal goes. It's like,
Okay.
"Oh."
All right. Good.
Be
So that's-
an in-face as in-person meeting as we can have in these times, with a few representatives from council, perhaps Mayor Harding, and I think we should make it harder to say no than sending them a letter.
I agree. It's kind of what I'm intimating, that I think we need to have some sort of face-to-face thing with them.
All right, that sounds good. So maybe, we can go back and forth about that offline, but I think that makes sense to request a meeting where we can discuss this with them now that we have the appraisal.
Cool.
Okay.
And that concludes my report and my updates.
All right, we made it. Congratulations. Thank you. Moving on to our borough manager's report.
Just a couple things to highlight from my report. We anticipate getting an additional $60,000 in tax money for the month of May. 2020 per capita and occupation tax bills are going to be going out by Cheryl on May 31st with a discount to July 31st, staying consistent. The office is going to be sending out gentle reminders for delinquents that did not pay 2019 business privilege and per capita before sending to collection sometime later in the summer, maybe even into the fall. The easement for the Fosters was all signed, sent to Bucky's office for final approval and recording, and that's all I have for my report. But then I also included in the package, in your packets, information that we received from Daywood Engineering, and they're proposing to put some signage, not prohibiting, but discouraging any kind of crossing the street down by South Street and then again by Van Horn. And this would be totally paid for by PennDOT. No monies from the borough at all, but just to try to encourage people to use the proper crosswalks instead of mid-blocks. And they just need a consensus from you guys that it's okay, and then everything will be forwarded and PennDOT will take care of it.
All right, so basically we need a motion to approve that they move forward with that work, but once it's done, they take care of everything.
Yes.
All right, would somebody like to make such a motion?
I'll make the motion. Make the motion to have those, I don't know the exact wording. Paul, would you like to handle the exact wording?
It's signs installed. Discouraging people crossing mid-block to use crosswalks.
All right. I move that we have it's PennDOT that's doing it?
It would be with PennDOT, but this is an engineering firm that contacted us by the name of Daywood Engineering out of Harrisburg.
Okay, and PennDOT's covering the cost
Yes.
All right, so I move that we approve to have signs installed to prohibit crossing outside of the crosswalk sections.
Is there a second?
This is free.
Anybody want?
I'll second.
Not to be like a nitpicky person, but just does anyone know what size they are? Because sometimes the signs can be out of scale to the environment where they're placed.
I don't believe they put the size of the signs. I could ask tomorrow and let you know. I'm sure they're not going to be humongous signs, but one never knows.
Do we have any say as to where they go? Sorry if you said this, but the audio cut out on me.
They already have sections where to put them. That is on the third page of the recommendation.
And does PennDOT have any evidence that this action reduces mid-street crossings by pedestrians?
No, but I think it's just a potential hazardous thing that they're seeing people are doing. So they're trying to discourage that and encourage people to walk either 200 feet or 400 feet to the actual crosswalk.
You know, the thing is that the reason I bring it up is because there are some areas where you see these signs that's a circle and a slash, and behind it is a person walking. And I personally find that kind of offensive, especially in a walkable area. And I want to make sure that they're not sending the signal that this is like a driving only kind of area in the way that they do it. So for me, it would be helpful just to get an idea of, is this really a helpful thing, or is this sort of like a, you know, intimidating thing for people walking?
Okay, so I will find out the size of the signs, what they're gonna look like, and report back.
Also,
I wonder, yes.
oh, go ahead.
Why is it so important to have them in those areas, but where we live,
Exactly.
Matt and Ryan, like we have to cross at a not crosswalk.
Yep.
We don't have a choice.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's kind of ridiculous that they did a traffic study that we don't need a crosswalk, and now they want to put up signs.
I understand. I don't know where this came from. It automatically just, well, they emailed me. Nobody ordered this. I think it was just a study that was done on PennDOT's roads.
Right, it is a state road, so I think, yeah, and Chief, actually, if you want to chime in here.
Yeah, I only have one thing to answer. It's speculation based, but I get a lot of complaints about that area specifically with school children because we have a school bus stop at South End, Maine. So those complaints may have also made their way to Harrisburg, which may have prompted some of this. But again, that's speculation.
Right, and just, I quickly looked through the application. It does give an item, or it does give a number for the sign, and it is one of these guys.
That's what I was afraid of. I hate that sign. It's so
So
confusing.
anyhow, procedurally, we did have a motion and a second. Is anybody withdrawing that motion or that second?
I'm withdrawing my second.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion then. That's fine.
All right, so then just so we make this clean and for the minutes, is anyone making a motion in regards to this item?
But I would just like to chime in. Can I chime in real quick, David? I just think that PennDOT makes it onerous to even install crosswalks. There seems to be a great need through the borough for more crosswalks for pedestrians, and signage is great, but there should be more opportunities for people to cross, especially in our downtown center, and even North Main and all the way up through South Main by the Commons. I mean, there's a couple locations that I think would be very good if we had more.
Well said. The problem is not signs telling people not to cross. It's that they don't have a place to cross.
Right. All right. So we have no motion, so there's nothing more to discuss. But I guess, Paula, if you could just let them know that we did consider it at the meeting. This was the outcome. And if they want to send additional information or, you know, balls in their court at this point.
Okay, will do.
But we said no. All right. Any additional items for manager's report then?
No, sir.
All right. That concludes the manager's report. We will move on to solicitor's report.
Yes, good evening. I actually don't have any specific items for tonight's meeting. We're working on a few things that will come up in June, but nothing this evening.
All right. Thank you. Nice and easy. Moving on, Mr. Harding, mayor's report.
So thank you. I was going to give my state of the borough address tonight, but in light of the lengthy engineer's report, I will save that for another evening. So just two quick things. Number one, wanted to again publicly thank Mayor Johnson for her help with the radio show that we've been doing over the past week. She's been really good at lining up some businesses to call in. And today we focused on businesses that weren't able to be open because of COVID and kind of talked to their owners and the people in the borough. So it was nice to hear, be a resource for the business owners in the borough to kind of voice some of their concerns. So thank you again to Manager Johnson for that. Second thing is, I probably should have said this at the beginning of the meeting when you asked President Bria about things coming up, events, but Monday being Memorial Day, although many of the events are canceled, there is still the 7 a.m. Rifle salutes and taps that is done at about a half a dozen of the local cemeteries. And I know over the years, some of you have joined that kind of parade route that it's like a car parade that goes around. It is one of the most touching services that they do in the borough, and one of the things that I think everyone should try to attend. So we gathered about 6:45 a.m. at the Legion, which is the one by the train station. And it takes about an hour or so to go around to the 6 different cemeteries and watch them do rifle salutes and play taps. So if you can make it, I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It's everything what Memorial Day is about. So please try to attend.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harding. I just want to note, I was able to join that event last year. It's a really great thing. And additionally, it's something that we can easily do with 6 feet of space between all of us. So I would encourage those to attend who are around to do so.
Mayor Harding, is it still starting at Slate Hill after you leave the Legion?
Yeah, 7 a.m. it goes to, I believe they're still doing Slate Hill, then they'll go down to St. Ignatius on the River, then they'll stop. This year, the only difference is they're going to stop in the early morning procession at the monument by the Yard of the Inn, because usually they save that for the actual ceremony, but there's no ceremony this year, so they'll add that as a stop. Yep.
Thank you.
And I could share the approximate, we're providing the escort, so I'll share the approximate times with Paula to send out to everybody.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on. Next is council member reports. We'll start with Mr. Barry.
Reached out to Reading Ave Committee. They're probably not going to meet for a while until things get back to normal. We should still consider any grant opportunities if they arise, so keep that in mind. And I think the EAC had an update earlier, so that's all.
All right, thank you, I see Liz's hand.
Can I comment on the grant opportunity?
Sure.
For Reading Ave property?
Yeah, so we were initially considering the Greenway Trails and Recreation Program grant at the end of the month for the Pico lot, but with the appraisal coming back so low and already having received, hopefully receiving some money for the other grant we've already applied for, perhaps it's worth applying to this grant for Reading Ave.
It's due by the end of the month?
Mm-hmm. So we could get the resolution done at the first June meeting and then send it in. They're always amenable to that. But yeah.
And how much, what is the grant? Is it a match?
There's a 15% match, I think. I don't know. I didn't look at the details because I didn't think we were going to continue moving forward with that for the Pico lot, but could probably pull it up real quick.
Can we circle back as she pulls it up, David?
Yeah, I see Councilperson Thompson wants to chime in, I'm sure, with something budget related, so go ahead.
Yeah, don't we still have unspent funds for Reading Ave this year? That I know that Mr. Buchalis put up a match, and I don't think that money has been spent, and I just think that it wouldn't be fiscally responsible to stretch ourselves any further this year.
Mr. Buchalis's money should probably be, I would think, returned because we never got the grant. It was meant to be a match.
Oh.
Yeah. That's why I was thinking.
I thought we did get that grant.
No, we were denied.
Okay.
So that was my only question. If not, if we don't apply for a grant, we should return his money.
And I have good news. They extended the deadline to July 31st, so we have time to think about it.
Okay, let's take that time, in my opinion.
All right, so we can possibly circle back on that one, given the extension. So
sounds good.
All right, Mr. Barry, anything else?
Nope, that's all.
All right, Mr. Ross.
We had our Public Works meeting tonight, but we pretty much covered everything with the engineer's report that we discussed in the Public Works meeting.
All right, thank you. Ms. Siegel Morris.
Nothing to report tonight.
Great, thank you. I also have nothing to report. Councilperson Thompson.
So, similar to last year, the Sandy Run Girl Scout unit is having their bridging and gold award ceremony. Last year, we sent them the gold award recipients letters from council that summarized their projects and thanked them for their service to the community. So we're doing germ-free letters this year. So if everyone is comfortable, please send me your electronic signatures and I'll put them on the letters to the gold award recipients. And I think everyone should have received that invitation. So we are invited to participate in the ceremony. Parks and Rec had a meeting last Tuesday. And so they've been tasked with talking over what reopening the tot lot will look like once that's allowed, what new guidelines might be in place there. So they're going to be working on that. They're also looking at a Quiet Streets initiative, which would close down one or more of borough streets one day a week or more so that pedestrians can walk on them as an alternative to the canal. So we're just in the beginning stages of talking about that. I've sent a note to Uri Feiner and President Bria to discuss that later this week. And then finally, general government met this evening, and we have 5 stagnant funds that haven't been touched in quite some time, several years. The 5 funds total $5,676.80. None of the monies are restricted funds, so we'd like to roll those into one of our reserve accounts, either our emergency fund or our capital reserve fund, and I wanted to open it up for input from council as to our preference.
What are the fund names, the 5?
General Fund PLGIT 700 and change. Escrow Fund PLGIT is 600 and change. 2015 grant from Santander is 1,200 and change. Canaloween Customer Bank $4. Wow. General Fund Customer Bank $3,100.
And we could move that none of them have restrictions.
Correct.
The grant. Okay. Fine with me.
Any preference on which one? We were initially saying to move it into capital reserve to help with Mary Yardley Bridge or another one of the projects like the Pico lot. But then Mr. Guarati was at the general government meeting and mentioned that we might also use it for COVID related emergency expenses, any that aren't covered by the state. So that's an option as well.
I would leave it to general government at their discretion to split it between the two.
Okay, we'll split it down the middle. That sounds good.
Or whatever.
What do you recommend? Just, do you have a preference?
I mean, we expect our COVID-related emergency expenses have been very low, and we expect that they will be covered by state relief. We have applied for that. I see the greatest need right now in our capital projects, Mary Yardley Bridge, Pico lot, the sidewalk. We just started talking about that again this evening. So $5,000 isn't a lot, but every little bit helps with those capital projects that we have on the horizon.
Yeah, generally, people say, well, we don't want to restrict the use of funds, but I personally, I'm very supportive of that concept because I think that it sends the right message and creates a self-discipline to make sure that we live within our means. So I favor that, but if you want to split it, I can support that too.
Just, we are moving money, so I think if we could just maybe get a formal motion for what we want to do.
I think it was general government's initial hope that it would all be moved to capital reserve. So I'll make the motion to move the full $5,676.80 to the capital reserve account.
I second that. We both second that.
Right. So motion been made by Councilperson Thompson and I'll say Councilperson Siegel Morris to roll over the funds previously discussed into capital reserve. So is there any further discussion from council on that matter? Right, none, and I see Mr. Guarati, you had a hand up there. Let me see if I can unmute you and you can chime in.
Well, actually, I don't remember hitting the hand. It could have been a glitch, but perfectly happy wherever these funds end up, as long as they're accounted for, I'm very happy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? All right. Let me just make sure there's no other hands up. We look good. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, hearing none, that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. So those will show up on the bills list for the next meeting, just as an FYI, and I have nothing else to report.
Thank you, Councilperson Thompson. Councilperson McCann.
Nothing to report.
All right, and finally, Councilperson Finer.
So community outreach had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and there were no visitors. So I just want to encourage any members of the public who are interested in community outreach to join our next meeting in June. I did get to speak to David Applebaum from Experience Yardley, and unfortunately, they have decided that they're going to have to cancel Music on Main for this upcoming summer season because there just doesn't really seem to be a way to control the social distance that would be required. That said, they're looking for other things that they can do. They are also going to continue to withhold and not hold the second Saturday for the time being. Again, maybe they'll get creative with that and do something virtual for that, but they're just kind of waiting to see how that one goes. But they are, they don't have anything official to announce right now, but they are working on an art project that sounds really interesting and exciting, and I think that people will like a lot. They're just waiting for a few things to get solidified, and then they'll be able to make that announcement. So stay tuned. Beyond that, I do have some information that I'll share offline. That another option for the email service that might be a little bit less expensive and simpler than MailChimp, but I'll talk to Councilman Thompson and Manager Johnson, and we'll see if we can move forward with some consensus around that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Finer. Moving on, next on our agenda is discussion items. So if any council members have any ideas, things that they might introduce at a future meeting, this is an opportunity to raise that as a general discussion point now. So if anybody has something of that nature, please jump in.
Just a quick question and follow up to Jerry Taylor's email that was forwarded to us. Do we anticipate cleaning up the streets and the gutters and just basic upkeep around the neighborhood, as the borough I assume typically does? Are we not doing that, or has it just been noticed?
So I can partially answer. I know that one item we did decide to do away with, or we discussed it at the last meeting, was with the street cleaning. We normally would do that after the parades. Since there are no parades this year, it seemed to make sense to cut that particular line item. In terms of some of the other things, I know that we were in the works. Councilperson Thompson had organized some community cleanup type events, and of course we are now not doing a whole lot together in person as a community. But the point was well taken that we can certainly keep an eye out. If something is in the territory of being a code violation, it can be handled through that avenue, certainly.
We do have our public works contractor clean up around the bridges and storm drains every once in a while. I mean, it could be done more, but it is expensive. So yeah, I think I like kind of a mixture of having professionals do it and having perhaps council and the community empowering them to do it as well. So we can organize more of that this summer.
Well, especially storm drains.
And then actually, since Mr. Taylor wrote the email he brought up, I saw he raised his hand there. So if you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, if
you know, council, I mean, grass growing up between your gutter and in the gutters really gives a bad image to the borough. I mean, you know, it makes you feel like a ghost town or something like that. And any way you can get those cleaned up, if you even put a notice out to the property owners, and I don't know if it would do much, but you know, if you feel that it's their responsibility to clean their gutters, go for it and send them out a letter. They may not even know. They might just assume that the borough is going to do that. And because the borough doesn't do it, then nothing happens. So it's just embarrassing. And my letter said broken windows. The more you keep the borough clean, you know, the better people respect it. And so if you let grass grow up in the gutters, then people just assume, oh, that's fine. I mean, you look at the country club, they throw all their cuttings into the gutter and you can't even see the curb anymore because it's so filled up with growth and debris and everything. It's embarrassing. So, I mean.
If that's true, that might be a violation of the MS4 for them to be doing that, and we should notify them of that.
I don't think it's intentional. Well, I mean, it is intentional, but I mean, everybody throws their grass clippings out in the street. You know, it's like, hey,
really?
When I have to rake it up, I'll just throw it out there. It's like common.
Yeah, no, point's well taken. It's something that we could keep a little closer eye on and be mindful of. So thank you.
The other, regarding the Yardley Country Club, I do believe they're in violation of the weed ordinance. They now have weeds above 12 inches. It truly would be nice if the country club were consistently a better neighbor, because the golf course itself is meticulously groomed, and then the portion between the curb on West College Avenue and their bushes is just left wild. So
Noted. We'll take a look. All right, so before we move on to that last business item, are there just any other council members that want to raise something now? All right, so hearing none, the final item of business is in regards to Certificate of Appropriateness 20-7A. This was an application for a stained glass window at 70 South Main Street. The applicant did appear before HARB. HARB voted 3-1 against approval of that application. So what I'd like to do now, and I believe Ms. Prickett was going to be on the, yes, she's here on the call. So I'm going to ask, since we do have Mr. Taylor with us, who is the chair of HARB, if we could begin with you giving a brief summary of the application and the decision that was made during the HARB meeting. And then at that point, I will acknowledge Ms. Prickett to essentially make her appeal to council on the final vote. All right, so Mr. Taylor, if maybe 3-minute summary of what this was.
Basically, the panel facing the street that has the date 1890 on it. Is everybody on council familiar with that? Okay, and they want to remove that panel and put in 3 stained glass windows. And stained glass windows are present in one other building at least, I think on West Afton Avenue, a small one. But the object of historic preservation is to preserve the most important details of a structure. And as noted in our comment, that this Queen Anne Victorian is the best example and the best preserved building of this type in the Yardley Historic District. So to allow this historic detail on the most historic Queen Anne building in the district to be demolished is the reason why we voted against it. Normally we try and work with the applicant, but this is, we felt was very significant. And the one dissent, Joe Schuler, said the final condition of the property after the renovation and any combination of stained glass windows would represent an acceptable historic preservation of a formerly dilapidated property. And I don't want to speak for Joe, but it sounds like he's feeling that any improvement to a property that's deteriorating is positive thing, and it is positive. But this is a historic detail that needs to be preserved.
All right, thank you. So at this point, Ms. Prickett, I'm going to unmute you. And then if you would like to take a few minutes to give a summary of what you would like to do and why you essentially are asking council to vote in the other way.
Sure. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the reason that we are requesting to make this change is the house was built in 1832, and I have been able to find absolutely no reference to why 1890 is on the house. So from that perspective, although Mr. Taylor says that it is of historical significance, I have been able to find no significance to what 1890 actually represents. So in my opinion, it's misleading because the house was not built in 1890, it was 1832. Additionally, the work done at the peak of that house is not done well. I'm not interested in maintaining that because I think that it's done poorly to begin with. I think a stained glass is appropriate for the house. I think it would make the house stand out even more than it already does. I don't believe that what's in that peak is significant. I believe the spire with the finial at the top is what makes the Queen Anne house significant. So from my perspective, maintaining something that is misleading and inaccurate for the home is not of historical significance or value.
Okay, so at this point, what I'm going to do is move through one by one with our council members. So if you have a question for either Ms. Prickett or for Mr. Taylor on behalf of HARB, please use your time to ask those. So I'll start with Mr. Barry.
Just a question for Mr. Taylor. Does the 1890 versus the 1830 change the historical significance if it was built earlier than 1890? Would your decision change?
I don't think there's any question. 1830 would have been a lot simpler building, like many of the buildings you might see on Main Street.
The Queen Anne Victorian style didn't exist in 1830. And the property itself may have been, a structure may have been there, but the 1890 represents the renovation done in the Queen Anne Victorian style. And it's the best example of Queen Anne that we have in the borough.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I'd just like to respond to that.
Oh, go
Mr.
ahead.
Priya. So understood that it is a Queen Anne style home, but there's no evidence that any renovation was done in 1890 other than someone putting a number on the house. So again, I think it's misleading where it is. And for the folks on the phone, I have said in HARB in the meeting that I am willing to put 1890 on the house. I just don't want it on the peak where it is. I'm willing to have a stained glass manufactured that says 1890 and put that on the house as a transom. I'm also willing to create a much nicer, more age-appropriate wood panel with 1890 on it and also make that a prominent feature of the house. I just don't want it on the peak.
Understood. Moving on, Mr. Ross, any questions?
I do. First, I think the stained glass would look really nice there. But my question's more about, in the packet, we have a picture of the stained glass that's in question. That's the piece of stained glass that you're looking to put there. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a early 1900s antique stained glass. So I'm looking at spending a significant amount of money to put this in.
Well, my question is, I actually, ironically, have a background in stained glass. Is that piece, to me, and I'm seeing a black and white image, but the design is not vintage and is not turn of the centuries. It's actually like a mid-70s era window panel set. So my issue would be with the physical selection of the glass itself, because it's really not fitting to the house. It's more of a, I would say, 75 to 78 kind of design. So it really doesn't fit with the house. But stained glass itself there.
it's a copper foil window, and it is an antique. It is not from the 70s.
That panel and that design is definitely mid-70s, 100%. I'm not sure where you're getting it from, where maybe we can do some research on it, but that all the regular copper foil stained glass style is standard through the mid 1800s. But that physical design is definitely a 70s era design. I can't, it's just a black and white picture, so I can't see the patina on it or anything, but that's to me, and from my knowledge of stained glass, that's a 70s style and not a turn of the century or vintage type piece.
All right. Ms. Siegel Morris, any questions?
This is for Mr. Taylor. Is this a type of window that is typically found in this style of house? Is any stained glass typically found in a Queen Anne style house?
It's not typical, but I'm sure, I don't know all the Queen Anne homes, so I haven't looked at them all, but
I didn't see, I just was Googling. I didn't really come up with too much, but the stained glass that I saw would, in any of the style of houses, looked like small squares or around the edges. It didn't look very ornate.
I think more typically you would find some stained glass work on side windows.
Not in the gable.
Going up a staircase, and the top of the staircase having a stained glass window there, but not typically on the front facade.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilperson Thompson, any questions? You're muted still.
The date is not a plaque or a cornerstone or anything. Are we assuming that it's that wood piece, painted wood piece, has been there since 1890?
I would say yes. I'm sure they put it in. And the Victorian is the wraparound porch and the terrace, and all that was 1890s style. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of, the real character of the house is that 1890 additions to it was probably just a rectangular building, which you can see sort of hidden behind all the additions. So you can see the original 1832 house, but you know, the Victorian just dominates everything that was there, and that's the 1890.
Thank you.
Councilman McCann, any questions?
My only comment is I'm really impressed by Matt Ross also having knowledge of stained glass. That was impressive. And just secondly, I have a profound respect for Harb and the work that they do and their institutional knowledge. And certainly I would love to see if there could be something worked out with Harb where maybe stained glass was placed on another portion of the house, still maintaining the 1890 and preserving the historical nature of that. So I don't know if there's a possibility at this point to find a solution.
All right, finally, Mr. Feiner.
Sorry about that. Yeah, well, a lot of good things have been said here, and I appreciate Mr. and Mrs. Prickett for wanting to invest in their house. It's always good for the community. At the same time, in my time on council, I think I've only seen one override of Harb, and it was a pretty extreme situation. And I don't pretend. Amazingly, we do have Matt Ross, who has a background in stained glass, but generally I defer to Harb for these things. And so I think to me, I would look for something very significant that would be appropriate for us to override that decision. Because a lot of people in the past have benefited from the guidance of Harb, including the property values being where they are, and the joy of being in our historical district. So I guess what I'm saying is kind of along the lines of what's been said here and what Councilman McCann said. Perhaps go back to Harb and see if you can work something out. If you can do this without disrupting what they feel is the historical core historical feature of your house, I think I could, that's a better route here.
I completely disagree. There's no way to work around putting a stained glass in the peak without removing the very poorly done wooden plaque that says 1890.
We did offer.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't have to be either or. I'm just saying that if that stained glass is inappropriate for a core element of the house, that maybe something else could be done with that area to fix the problem that of its condition.
All right, so we've gone through, members of council have all had the opportunity to ask their questions. We do have the application before us, so council does need to act upon it. So would someone like to make a motion at this time?
Yeah, I'll make a
Hello?
motion to accept the HARB recommendation.
All right.
I'll second it.
All right, so there's a motion by Mr. McCann, seconded by Mr. Ross to accept the HARB recommendation, which would in turn be a denial of this certificate of appropriateness. I know council just had their moment to ask questions, but does anyone have additional comments upon the motion?
Just one more question for maybe Jerry. Is there an acceptable alternative in your view?
For the gable end, no, because it's such a historically significant element. We did talk about there's later additions, little modifications to the house where you could put stained glass, but that peak is very significant to the architecture. So.
All right, any other members of council or the mayor want to offer comment on the motion?
Well, just so if they need to replace it because my understanding is it's rotted or worn out, are you suggesting that the only really acceptable solution would be to essentially reconstruct the exact same thing?
Yes, and I don't think there's any indication that it's so significantly deteriorated that it can't be restored. If that's the case, then I'd like to go up there and inspect it to see if it's rotten and all that stuff. But I don't think it is. It doesn't appear to be. It seems to be. It needs paint, but the entire house does. So.
Thank you.
Great. Additional questions or comments from council? All right, seeing none, we'll open to comments from the public. Ms. Prickett, I'm assuming that you'll want to make comment here, so I'll acknowledge you first.
Okay, so I have a feeling I know the way that this is going to go, so I'm simply going to say that I'm going to probably paint the peak one color. I don't like what's there. I've requested a change. I get the feeling that no matter what I go back to HARB with as far as an alternative, I'm going to be shot down for that. So if the 1890 falls off, I'm not trying to threaten anybody. I'm really not going to put any effort into maintaining the peak the way it stands. I'll paint it and I'll keep it from rotting through, so my attic doesn't get bats or anything, but I'm certainly not going to go out of my way to maintain something I don't like and I think is insignificant compared to the rest of the home. And I find it unfortunate that HARB is not even willing to work with me in trying to make it any different than it already is.
Okay, do we have additional comments from the public? Ms. Perlmutter, I see your hand up. Was that from before or is that in regards to this matter?
Yeah, I had it before with the signs, but it's in regard to this matter. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just was wondering, the HARB meeting where this was discussed wasn't public. Are the HARB meetings going to be on Zoom? I mean, because there's a lot of other issues that I noticed, because my house is 1890, and I think it was the same architect that did both of these properties. So again, I was just wondering if the HARB meetings are going to be on Zoom, because other than the stained glass, I'm just curious as to, you know, the porch that was just jackhammered off the back of it, you know, if that was approved by HARB. And, you know, I know that's not part of this, but I was wondering if it's possible, Jerry, to have those meetings on Zoom.
They are.
Perlmutter,
Oh, they are?
The last meeting was conducted by Zoom. We do have a recording of that meeting posted. I do believe the link was posted ahead of time as well. We did also this past week review and clean up the way that we're listing those on the website. So it should be a little bit more clear going forward. But as always, the HARB meeting or EAC meeting, whatever it may be, are public meetings.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't see it. I have to know where to look.
All right, is there additional, yes, I see Ms. Taylor, go ahead.
This debate, I believe, came up in this application, but it comes up quite often. Historic preservation is about preserving history. It isn't about making things look better or prettier. In the best of all possible worlds, the outcome of an historic preservation project makes something look better, but just because someone says, oh, well, this will look better, that doesn't mean that it's a valid example of historic preservation or what should be best done to the building. So that to me is a very important differential to make. It isn't about making something look good. It's about preserving the authenticity of the structure.
Thank you. All right, and any final comments from the public? All right, I don't see any. So just to restate the motion that's on the table, it is a motion to accept the HARB recommendation, which is in effect a denial of the application. So all those in favor of accepting HARB's recommendation, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? That motion carries 5-2. All right, that concludes our business for this evening. So a motion to adjourn would be in order.
A motion.
Second.
All right, the motion is made by Councilperson Barry, seconded by Councilperson Thompson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Night.